have a unique perspective as a nurse, and your husband has a unique perspective as a doctor. Do you find that that has, or do you assume, I guess, that that may have made things easier for you in this process? Uh,
Lots of people have asked this. I think it goes both ways. So, in some respects, our knowledge and skills have been helpful because we understand the terminology and we
mhm.
understand the process. Um, so, those types of things are quite useful, but I know where it certainly was not helpful is, again, for Colin, his only previous exposure for people with mesothelioma was a guy that he'd seen when he was a student doctor, um, who basically came in with a fully encased lung, dying a very horrible death.
Mhm.
Very very late on to be diagnosed, and that had stuck with him, and that was really his only experience of mesothelioma before he got it,
Mhm.
before he was diagnosed with it. And so, in that respect, that was a huge disadvantage because immediately that was his picture, that was his reference point. Um, I think the advantage, however, of being a nurse or a doctor is you're fairly used to advocating for yourself or for others with
Mhm.
medical staff. And so just because they suggest something, so again, for Carl, it was suggested that he had a talc pleurodesis when he first went in. He had so much fluid on his lung, they drained 8 litres off his lung. And
Wow.
usually one of the suggestions is that they drain it and then they do a procedure called a talc pleurodesis where they effectively put talc in,
Mhm.
um, which causes scar tissue, and then so that there's nowhere for the fluid then to sort of get back into.
Mhm.
Um, and Cole kind of went, again, reference point for that. He'd seen a young guy in the emergency department who'd had one and who was in a terrible amount of pain. And so he said, I just don't think I want to do that just yet.
Mhm.
There's new technology, there's nanotechnologies and things coming on board, and if I do that, I might just scupper myself. So I
Right.
don't want to do that. I'll take the risk, and I'll have another drain if I need to. Um, so big advantage in that situation, disadvantage in that particularly where we live in Western Australia. We've only got a population in the city of just under 2 million, so it's a really small population. And so even though we are being cared for at a hospital that neither of us have worked in, the community is very small, and so privacy and confidentiality are a little bit more difficult to come by.
Mhm.
It isn't an issue for us. We have chosen to be sort of very upfront and very open to everybody. But for other people, and certainly maybe people with different types of cancer, or maybe even just sort of different chronic diseases, that's a really difficult place to navigate because you can't go for a follow-up appointment without seeing either one of your patients or one of your colleagues. And certainly comes to the point where you're sick of people saying, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And that was one of the reasons actually that we decided to be so upfront with the diagnosis and tell as many people as we could, as quickly as we could, so that we didn't have to continue having those conversations of, "Hey, how are you going?" Well, fairly shit actually. And now it just goes something of, "Hey, how are you going? How are you feeling?"
Mhm.
You're going, "Oh, this is just normal life. This is just how it is now." Um, so yeah, pros and cons. From an advocacy point of view, a definite pro, but yeah, privacy and confidentiality, and also you have no choice. You know where to go and find the literature.
Mhm.
Um, I guess the good thing is you're also sort of trained to be critical of the literature, so you don't just believe everything that you read. But again, that could be a good or a bad thing because there would have been certain points during this, whatever it is, journey, um, where it would have actually been really nice to I've had a few days thinking that cherries were going to make it all better. But that was it's just putting off the inevitable. So, what do you think actually? Because you're not medical, are you? You're a lay
No,
person as
I am
far
a lay
as
person. I am, I was a filmmaker and writer, so
yeah.
I'm not particularly uh, well schooled in medicine per se. I never took any courses in college or read any textbooks when I was younger. But what I am good at is researching,
Mm,
and I am, I think, fairly good at using my critical thinking skills,
mm,
and I understand things like how to read statistics and what they do and do not mean, and that was very helpful for me at the beginning, especially when I decided to, consult Dr. Google and
yeah.
look at the prognosis. Yeah, I mean, this is before I was diagnosed. I started to look up like, well, okay, I know all my symptoms.
Mm,
Let me start just kind of running it down, and on the outside chance that I don't just have some run-of-the-mill lung infection going on that everybody seems to think is most likely, um, or at least that's all they're willing to tell me is most likely. At that point, um, just to see what else might be out there. What else could it be?
mm,
I kept coming back to cancer, and
mm,
I kept coming back to it being at least stage three.
mm,
I thought it was very unlikely it was still stage two. I hadn't
mm,
really made the jump to stage four as a likelihood at that point,
yeah.
um, but I hadn't also been scanned yet at that point. I had had an X-ray, I'd had a lot of other tests, but I hadn't had a full body scan yet. And um, so I was getting more and more convinced that that's where it was heading. I couldn't figure out why I would have had it, but
Yes.
I certainly was having a harder time thinking that it was anything else. Um, and I just just to be safe, I looked up the statistics and I saw that like, oh well, then I've got 18 months. That's
Mm,
eh, that's a lot to wrap my mind around
yeah.
without knowing for sure if that's what's happening. And then, um, but I also realized that those statistics are culled from a population that is predominantly much much older and more infirm. And
Yeah.
so from the beginning, I thought those are statistics I can beat,
Mm,
because at 46, I was in really very good health.
mm,
And aside from this incredible shortness of breath that I was dealing with, which was incidentally not caused by the cancer, um, I I'd had I've had a partially collapsed lung that was probably caused by the tumor, but
yeah.
um, but it was the collapsed lung that was more at play, and it was only a small part that was collapsed. Mostly, I had lung infection. I had like walking pneumonia or something, and I went on antibiotics. It cleared up this cough that I'd been having for a long time, and I suddenly started feeling so much better. And that was
Mm,
also confounding all my doctors, because every time I saw them, I was not only acting better, but I was feeling better and everything, but I was visibly improving.
mm.
And they're like, that's highly unusual if you have cancer, so we're probably dealing with something else. And so it was actually slowing the process down, the fact that every time I got, if I
Because
could,
you were young and fit and
yeah,
compensating.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it was a big thing, but I had to teach myself. I had to teach myself what the different, terminology meant, and I had to teach myself how to communicate in a way that was understandable and direct, and not, you know, trying to candy coat anything, because I've never
Mm.
been interested in that for these kinds of things. It's like if you can't talk about it in an open, straightforward, and honest manner, then what are you doing? You're not really having a conversation at that point. And I didn't want my doctor to be in a position where he was feeling like he had to treat me with kid gloves, like he had to, I don't know, make me feel something that was unreal. I don't know if any. I think that's why so many doctors have such a bad reputation for their bedside manner, because people, they don't want to be spoken to directly, or something. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with other people. I do know.
I, I think it's people don't know how to do it,
Yeah, well, this is a
and
huge thing.
doctors and nurses
Mm-hmm.
actually the same. Like that, it's possibly only even recently, if at all, that doctors are taught how to deliver, like physically
Mm-hmm.
given training on how to deliver
Mm-hmm.
news.
Well,
Um,
I mean, when I was talking to my doctor about my prognosis, what's going to happen here, when we were first talking about what options I had, I had questions like, well, okay, so what is this chemotherapy going to do, and how's it going to be effective, and and what happens if we go in for that first scan and it doesn't show anything has improved. And his response to me was, well, that's when we call hospice. And to me, at that point, I was like, this is my guy. He
okay.
knows I can talk to him because he's not,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's just telling me the truth.
Yeah.
And um, I probably use that story too much. If you watch the interview I just did earlier today, I said basically the same thing. Um, but it was true because it established for me that there's a clear pathway that I can. I mean, I can
Yes.
laugh at this. I can have a sense of humor about it too. It's like, well, okay, so that's it. If this doesn't work, then I guess it's the end of the line.
It's
But it's good
going
to
back
know,
to yeah.
and it's important to be able to address that openly, and know that this is a reality that we're dealing with. This is a
Mm,
situation that could very well occur, and I want to be prepared for it.
mm.
I mean, as it turns out, actually, there are other options that I will have if the chemo
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that was
doesn't
my
work.
kind of really. Are you?
Well, it was
It was
basically like, if I don't respond, what are the choices? But
yeah.
there are a lot of things that have opened up too, because this was 2 years ago, and
Yeah.
2 years ago the immunotherapies were just coming out of trial. There were not
Mm,
any on the market yet. In fact, I was caught in a little limbo because I missed getting into a trial just by weeks,
mm,
and the things that were supposed to come on the market were delayed by the
yeah.
FDA here. So I couldn't wait for the immunotherapy drugs to come out, and I missed my trial. So I didn't have any choice except going on to standard chemotherapy.
The therapy.
And
Yeah.
then I had a choice between two oncologists that I could see.
Mm,
One who was a research scientist and is brilliant, and one who was an unknown commodity to me, but my insurance company wanted me to go to.
okay. Yeah.
And I met with both of them. I wanted to see what the two people had to say, what was different. You can probably guess which one I ended up going with. But the other guy was nice.
Persuade your
He was good.
insurance company to pay.
Sorry, I
Did
didn't.
you manage to persuade your insurance company to pay? I'm assuming you went in with a brilliant
Yes,
scientist.
yes.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't me. It was a nurse navigator at the hospital that I was diagnosed at. She did the amazing work of getting me this coverage for this guy, and it was an amazing gift to me to be diagnosed where I was, when I was, with the people that that did it, because it put me in a position, in a location that I would never have been able to get into on my own,
Yeah.
and my life is completely different as a result.
Mm,
I mean, I'm on a different drug, that one that has worked amazingly well for me and would not have been an option for me otherwise.
yeah.
And it's great because it's the more expensive one,
Mm.
basically. So my insurance company, of course, was probably really angry. At some point, somebody was like, "Who approved this?"
Yes. Yeah.
But once it was begun, there was no way to go back on it, um, but it's made all the difference for me because the side effects have been totally different, and the effectiveness has been amazing. There's no way I could have stayed on the drug that the other doctor would have put me on. I could not have been on for 2 years.
Right.
No one does it.
Yeah. It's just too toxic.
Yeah. So I would have been on taking Avastin for maintenance, and that's only going to do so much. It doesn't do anything to kill the cells. It just prevents them from, growing much. But it won't do anything systemically, really. And yeah, so I kind of figured like if I had been with the other oncologist and followed his protocol, I would probably be dying. And if not, I would certainly be scrambling to try something else and getting into some trials. And maybe that would be amazing and great. And maybe I'd be, who knows, maybe there'd be no evidence of disease if that was the case, but it's highly unlikely. Because I wouldn't have been getting this kind of attention, this kind of care, or that I certainly wouldn't have been connected to somebody who was connected. And as a result, I've been able to do things that kind of matter more, and I understand a lot more about what's going on out there, and so that's for me that's made all the difference. And but this isn't my story. I write about this stuff. People can read this.
Yeah.
So
I just think it's quite interesting because obviously the Australian healthcare system is very different to the American healthcare system, and different again to the UK healthcare system. So we kind of have a bit of what you have and a bit of what the UK have. So we have a system where you're entitled to free treatment from the government, but if you earn over X amount, then it's beneficial for your taxes to actually pay private healthcare as well, because then you get kind of a tax rebate for doing so. What that has meant for us is actually we've used the public system throughout because that's where the best care actually is. But we've had sort of little add-ons from our private health insurance, and that's nothing to do with treatment. At this stage, it's purely, a private room in the public hospital, that type of thing, not sort of anything more than that. But we're very fortunate in that being on a trial, there is no cost involved. Even if we weren't on a trial, there would be no cost for the chemotherapy to us or to the insurance company. That would be picked up by the healthcare system. And I think that's one of the difficulties for you guys in the States. You were fortunate in that you had healthcare, you had healthcare insurance. But, is there a risk that at some point they're going to turn around and go, actually, it's too expensive, we're bumping you? Is that a risk?
It's funny. You should ask that question because right now we don't really know what the risk is going to be down the line, because Congress right now is trying to rescind the Affordable Care Act that is what was in effect when I got my insurance, when I started this process. And as a result of the Affordable Care Act, I can't be dropped by my insurance. They can't refuse to pay for life-saving treatments.
Yeah.
However, if the act is rescinded, we don't know what would replace it. And some of the proposals that have been floated out there do have clauses to prevent pre-existing conditions from being considered by the insurance companies, but some of those proposals also would make it very, very easy for the insurance companies to price it out of reach. Wouldn't technically be denying me coverage, but it could be made so unaffordable that it would effectively be denying me coverage.
Yeah.
And there are a number of different proposals that have gone out there that are really, really frightening in that regard. Because I know that from everything that I've spoken about with the medical people that I deal with, very likely, if it wasn't for the Affordable Care Act, I wouldn't have coverage, and I would be, I'd probably be dead as well. and it doesn't seem likely at all with the insurance system that existed prior to the Affordable Care Act that I would have survived more than 2 years.
Mm.
So by now, I would most likely be gone.
Yeah.
And really, it's mind-boggling to me that this is just a matter of insurance coverage and being allowed to keep it, and the insurance company having to cover what I've been paying into.
Mm.
Of course, this would all be a lot less expensive for the country as a whole if we were in a single payer system.
Mm.
Convincing people of that is nearly impossible here. Uh,
Mm.
and just mentioning anything that sounds like socialized medicine, it's like you're conjuring something evil out of a cauldron.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it's I just don't understand it. I mean, it's as a cost issue and as a quality of care issue, it's much more reasonable to have a single payer system. You will should get better care for less money.
Mm.
I mean,
Well,
it
all the
stands.
evidence points to that, though, doesn't it? That's the really frustrating thing, is that if you compare health systems across the world, America has the least effective, most expensive, least accessible healthcare system in the developed world.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, we're supposed to be an evidence-based society,
Mm-hmm.
making our policies based on good evidence. And yet, there it is, right in front of them.
We
There
do
is so much
we
research
do
to back it
not
up.
have an evidence-based society, at least
Well,
in
allegedly,
so
like,
many. Yeah, allegedly is right, but I mean, we really people respond based on things that reinforce their preconceived notions, whatever they've been indoctrinated into, and it time and again, I'm having these discussions with people where they're like, they are insistent that their friend in Canada has to come to the United States to get treated, and
yeah,
it's like, well, I mean, sure, a wealthy Canadian might choose to come see a specialist in the United States,
right, yeah,
just like a wealthy person anywhere can go see whoever they want, but
yes,
that doesn't take away from the fact that Canadians as a whole are getting better care
yeah.
and for less money.
Mm.
And I just don't, I don't get it. Um,
But one of the very frustrating things about that is that at the moment, I think we've got a reasonable system, but our current government, and I'm kind of aware I'm getting a bit political, so I'll get down off my soapbox very soon, um, seems intent on following the British system, which is following the American system into private insurance. And again, you're going, not only is the evidence right there in front of you that this is more expensive and less effective, and the cost of the public health is actually far inflated. The evidence is there with the state. It's a working model. There's all this research behind that, and you're still going down that because you think it's cheaper, even though here is, several pieces of paper that say your bottom line actually it's cheaper in this box, but in your public health box and in your loss of productivity box, it's hideously more expensive. And so, I can't imagine how frustrating it is for you guys, and then to watch our system that currently works just trickling down that route is
but Liz, as a medical professional, surely you understand that you'll make more money and live a happier life if there was private insurance involved and not not a government controlling all this. I mean, isn't that?
Well, apparently that's strangely wasn't why we went into medicine. No, it wasn't about the money, honey. It was about doing some good.
But what about all those hefty loans you have to pay back for school?
Well, I didn't have to have any of those because, again, in England at the time, I actually got paid to train as a nurse. Not very much, a bursary type wage, but I got paid and didn't incur any fees. Colin, when he went through medical school, didn't incur any fees. to train as a doctor. Now that has changed in the UK as well, and I know here, talking to colleagues, it's about $40,000 worth of debt that you leave nursing school with now, and I think $125,000 worth of debt as a doctor. It doesn't necessarily have to be upfront debt. It can be paid by the government, and then when you start earning X, you then pay Y back. Right. And even in this system, where they do pay for their university fees, I generally wonder, from a nursing point of view, why anyone would want to be a nurse when you come out with $40,000 worth of debt. That means you're working the entirety of your first year as a nurse just to pay off your debt. It's just, I really don't understand why you would want to be. However, I do understand that the advantages of a job where actually you get to make a difference are significant, and that's probably why we're still paid really very poorly, commiserate to other industries, because we do it because we like it, not because it's good money. And yeah, being medical professionals, there are people out there who are motivated by money, no doubt. I've met them, and most of them are arseholes. However, I would genuinely say the majority of people out there who are doing medicine start off at least doing it for the right reasons, because of a genuine need to want to make a difference.
That's good to know. I appreciate
they
that.
start off at least. And I think certainly in oncology and things, this is where it's interesting being medical professionals on the other side of the desk, and that's going to be actually an upcoming blog post, the other side of the desk, which is we found where all the nice doctors and nurses are. I worked mainly in public health and emergency, and Cole's an emergency physician, and within that kind of environment, you maybe don't always present the best version of yourself, and you can have some run-ins with people across specialties. And although the emergency team itself is very collegiate, other people think their priorities are greater, which is clearly never the case. Whereas here in oncology land, in cancer land, the doctors and the nurses have been so lovely. And again, it's you talked briefly about looking for the bright side, looking for the gifts. That's one of the gifts that we have really found in this, is there are some amazing people out there, and they can't be doing it for the money, because if you were doing it for the money, you'd choose dentistry or something that didn't require you to sit down and tell people with 10 and younger age children that they're dying. Most people wouldn't choose to do that unless they felt they had some value to add. And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's the value that you add in that is how you tell people and what you can offer them to support them through that process, as opposed to just take these multivitamins and off you go and feel better. So, yeah, politics I should probably steer clear from, because I get quite vocal.